Two servers. I want you to feel it. Yeah, on the side. Awesome. Sit together. And we will get started in just a minute. So I want to ask if you have a cell phone with you today or some alarm system that's going to go off in a couple minutes. feel free to turn that on. Thank you. Hey, welcome. Everyone can take a seat. Good morning. I'm Chaplain David Miller. Welcome to our first ever spiritual resiliency event at VA Northern Indiana Healthcare System. When we combine the word spirituality, what gives life meaning and purpose, with the word resiliency, to endure and grow through life's greatest challenges, we discover that there's a strong link between the two. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, reflected on his time in the concentration camps, stating, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning." Finding meaning and purpose in the midst of pain and suffering is a spiritual journey. The chaplain team here at the VA cares deeply for those who are suffering. I think of Henry Nouwen, the Catholic priest and theologian, who put it this way: when we honestly ask ourselves which person in our lives meant the most to us, we often find that it is those who, instead of giving advice, solutions, or cures, have chosen rather to share our pain and touch our wounds with a warm, tender hand. This image perfectly reflects the love that we desire to show to each of our veterans that we encounter. We do not believe that going through suffering is the worst thing that can happen in life, but rather going through it alone. Mother Teresa said, "Being unwanted, unloved, uncared for, forgotten by everybody. I think that is a much greater poverty than the person who has nothing to eat." If you're going through a difficult time on your life journey today, may this event remind you that you are not alone. You are loved and cared for because we love and care for you. The veterans and staff of VA Northern Indiana, you will persevere through this current struggle and find yourself stronger on the other side. Now, in your bulletin today, take that out for a minute. You have a little sheet of paper for those who came in person. For those who came virtually, thank you, but you won't have this. Please write down some questions on that little piece of paper that you've always wanted to ask a chaplain brigadier general. I'm sure they're on your mind. And as he speaks, I think some will come to mind. And then after he speaks, I'm going to collect those and we're going to have a time where he answers some of our questions today. And if you need a bulletin or a pen, raise your hand and we'll get that to you. Without further ado, please stand if you are able for the invocation by Chaplain Wayne Bearden, Chief of Chaplain Service, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Rollins Street, Commander of VFW Post 60, and then the National Anthem, which will be sung or led by Chaplain David Meinzen.
I invite you to pray with me. Almighty God, we've gathered for this special occasion to heighten the awareness of and celebrate spiritual resiliency. As the world changes around us and we're stretched to our limits and beyond, let us possess the spiritual stamina and elasticity to snap back with increased fortitude and experience peace. Give us the discernment needed to recognize any shrouded trauma that may exist in our lives and the necessary skills to develop and fully benefit from spirit and soul care. And help us to remain compassionate as we journey with others through their moments of increased expectations and uncertainties. We ask your blessing on this event and that during this time we become better positioned to enhance the spiritual health that is steady and sure. We request this in your holy name. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America, to the republic which is standing one nation
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And feel free to join with me. Oh, sing and you sing by the dawn's but so proudly we hailed at the twilight's evening, whose broad stripes and bright stars on the perilous fight, for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, when the rockets sent the bomb bursting in there, they drove through the night, that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that song of banner yet wave, for the land of the free and the home of the
Thank you. You may be seated. I would now like to invite to the podium Anthony Colon, Interim Director, VA Northern Indiana Healthcare System.
Morning. My pleasure to welcome you to this event that emphasizes the resiliency that comes through spirituality and faith. There are 45,000 veterans for VA Northern Indiana that practice over 60 distinct faith traditions. Their religious preference is unique. Each provide a sense of meaning and purpose to the veteran, which aids in their ability to persevere through life's difficulties. We at VA Northern Indiana are dedicated to providing a whole health approach to serving our veterans. This includes spiritual care. We have an excellent team of chaplains here and they are the tip of the spear for spiritual care here at VA Nix. Once again, I want to thank you for attending today, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colon. I would now like to invite Stephanie Rollo, our employee whole health coordinator, to share about whole health.
Hello, everybody. Today, I want to talk to you all about whole health and spirituality. So in our modern world, we like to prioritize physical health above all else. But I think it's crucial also to recognize that our mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being are very interconnected. So whole health isn't about what's the matter with you. It's about what matters to you. It's about recognizing that our bodies, minds, and spirits, as well as our communities, are intricately intertwined, and that nurturing one aspect has a profound impact on the others. Whole health empowers and equips people to take charge of their lives and their well-being, as well as to live their lives to the fullest. So we talk about spirituality, and that's not necessarily just about religion. Spirituality is also about finding that meaning and purpose in your lives. It's about connecting with something greater than ourselves, and nurturing our inner selves is cultivating that sense of peace, gratitude, and compassion. Dr. Frederick Craigie stated that spirituality is what is sacred in people's lives, the things that we cherish, and the values that are deeply important to us. This includes our relationships with people, our community, God, or a higher power. These connections need to be cultivated, nurtured, and honored. Prayer, meditation, mindfulness, walking the labyrinth are all vehicles of spiritual wisdom, discernment, and refreshment. Research has shown that people who prioritize their spiritual well-being often experience greater overall happiness, better mental health, reduced risk of death. So, for instance, by connecting with our inner selves and with others, we can cultivate resilience in the face of life's challenges, find greater fulfillment in our relationships, and experience profound sense of purpose. Today, it's easy to lose sight of what truly matters. We're bombarded with distractions and obligations, leaving little time for that self-reflection and connection. But by tending to our spiritual components of whole health, we can find balance and meaning in our lives. So start with being who you are. This is identifying what's important to you and expressing the values you find within yourself. This can begin with a simple question such as, what matters most in your life to you right now? Or what brings you a sense of joy or happiness? Find a spiritual anchor or a sacred space. It can be anywhere or anything. It can be going outdoors, something you carry around in your pocket, or even a place of worship. This should provide you a sense of peace, refreshment, and affirmation. So cultivate your relationships. Reach out to others, even if you haven't talked to them in a while. This can lead to heartfelt, meaningful discussions and renewal of relationships that might have fallen by the wayside. Practice gratitude. So identify what you're grateful for and then show gratitude to others as well. This can help you recognize the small but meaningful aspects within your life. Practice self-compassion. Be kind to yourself. I think we forget that a lot in life. Share that compassion with others, because self-compassion can increase your happiness, connection to others, and optimism. Practice mindfulness. So take time to focus on the present moment, on purpose, and without judgment. When we are mindful and deeply in touch with the present moment, our understanding of what's going on both internally and externally deepens, and we can be filled with a sense of peace. So I invite each of you to take time to nurture the spiritual part of your whole health, whether it's through meditation, prayer, spending time in nature, practicing gratitude, or engaging in acts of kindness in your day-to-day lives. Find what speaks to your soul and then nourish it. In doing so, you support your whole health. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Rollo. It's my honor now to introduce our speaker for today's program. Chaplain Brigadier General David Gretz, U.S. Army retired. Chaplain Gretz began his 41 years, 7 months, and 6 days of military service in the United States Navy on active duty from 1975 to 79, serving on a P-3C flight crew that operated in the Mediterranean Sea and North Atlantic Ocean, where he achieved the rank of first-class petty officer. In '84, he received a direct commission in the Army Reserves as a chaplain candidate, and then chaplain with the Army National Guard. He has served in the Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky Army National Guards, and has deployed to Hungary and Kuwait, and has served in many chaplaincy roles over the years. Most notably, he was the state chaplain of Kentucky National Guard, joint chaplain for the National Guard Bureau, and assistant to the chief of chaplains for the Army National Guard. He retired from the military in 2017, obviously at the rank of Brigadier General. Chaplain Gretz has also served as the chief chaplain for the Louisville, Kentucky VA Medical Center and the Lexington, Kentucky VA Medical Center for a total of 31 years before retiring in 2023. He currently works for Guidepost Magazine as a co-liaison for military and veteran outreach. And from my perspective, his greatest accomplishment has been raising 3 wonderful daughters and allowing me to marry his oldest daughter 18 years ago. He's been one of the greatest influences in my decision to join the military and has been a strong mentor and guide to me in life and chaplaincy for almost 2 decades. So, sir, the floor is yours.
So as David says, my retirement job is working part-time for Guidepost. So if you know Guidepost magazines, you know it's all about the story. Their stories. I mean, the magazine, it's just about people's stories. So I'm going to tell you a lot of stories about my own life. And I think try to interconnect that with how you do spirituality, at least how I did it, how it made sense to me, how it gave me some meaning and purpose in life. Because really that's what, and thank you for a good introduction there on whole health, on spirituality and what that's all about. And so as we kind of look and investigate our lives, I think many times when we get into struggles, it's really trying to find what that means to us and how we can come through it, how we can come through as a stronger person. My journey started in 1957. January 10th of 1957 was a pretty significant day for my family. In the middle of the night, January 10th, our home was bombed twice. Montgomery, Alabama. You know your history of Montgomery at that time. The bus boycott had just ended. My father was a Lutheran pastor, pastoring an all African-American church in Montgomery, Alabama. During the boycott, he actually worked with Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy and others to run that boycott. He was the secretary for the association that ran the boycott. The Klan hated my family, probably hated them more than they hated Dr. King and others, and tried 3 different occasions to snuff our lives out. So at 9 days old, a bomb went off in our front yard. Had the original bomb that they'd thrown earlier in the evening gone off, it was 10 sticks of dynamite, 2 fuses that burned halfway down and didn't go off. It would have blown up the house, killed all of us in the house, probably our neighbors next door, probably the neighborhood would have been pretty well devastated. And so my life started off really as pretty much a miracle, you know, of something going on and knowing that God was there for me. I was a preacher's kid, and so that was kind of the atmosphere that I grew up in, taking care of others and being out there and watching Dad do what he was doing. One of my other daughters just finished a class in counseling, and she said, "I want you to read this final paper I had to write." And the first, I don't know, 2-3 paragraphs It's all about how she used to watch me, and that's kind of what she wants to do because she watched me taking care of people and counseling and being there for others. So it's pretty significant to have those kind of mentors. And my own father was a mentor for me and the kind of things that I'm doing. As David said, I joined the Navy at 18. Some of you know Billy Joel. Do you remember that Piano Man song? And one of the lines in Piano Man song says, and he was singing to David, who was still in the Navy and probably would be for life. And I can remember saying that, and that's not me. That's not me. Well, 41 years plus years later, I was a lifer and maybe not in the Navy, but anyway, after I did my 4 years of active duty in the Navy, there was a group called the Navigators that somehow I got some literature of theirs, and basically they talked about as enlisted folks staying in and sort of not being necessarily being a chaplain, but being there as a kind of a witness to others, as a Christian young man to stay in and kind of do that kind of thing. So I sort of reluctantly got out. I wanted to. I knew I wanted to get out. I wanted to go to college and actually then go on to seminary and so forth, but I couldn't figure out exactly how that fit together. So I did get out and got in the Navy Reserves for a little while. Was talking to somebody about that whole thing, my whole dilemma. He said, "You ever thought about being a chaplain?" And it's like lights went off, bells were going off, whistles are blowing, all kinds of things. I'm going, okay, that's it. That's the answer there. And so that was really my quest from that point on, was to go back in the military and actually try to do active duty. Didn't work out. Active duty didn't work out too well. If you remember when the wall fell down in Berlin, and you remember what Clinton called that, and he did a big riff, reduction in force. He called that the peace dividend. And I tried to get in active duty when that peace dividend was going on, and so they just weren't taking a whole lot of chaplains at that time. I wasn't able to get in, but frankly, you might look at that as a setback, and I really did. For a while, I was pretty devastated. I worked I had to do 4 years of college. I had to do 3 years of seminary. The denomination I was a part of required that I pastor a church for 3 years before I would go on active duty. So I had 10 years invested in this plan to have it kind of flat turned out. The U.S. Army decided they wanted to change my plan. So for a good while, I was pretty upset with how things were going in life, and it didn't really meet up to my expectations. But it forced me into to doing clinical pastor education within a hospital setting, and decided to become a hospital chaplain. It led me into the VA. I stayed in the National Guard, and I didn't do too bad in the Guard as well, and had some pretty good assignments and so forth and so on. So, sometimes even those pushing towards what we think is the right thing, having to get turned around and go in a different direction, it's not always a bad thing. David mentioned raising 3 daughters. We got to raise them all in the same community. All went to the same elementary school, two different middle schools. They all went to the same high school. They all had, kind of had some stability to family life. So as it turns out, it probably was the best thing for my family to be able to have some of that stability, be in one place, and not to go running around all over the country. Another thing that kind of went on within my life was with my assignments within the military. When I got out of basic training, and Navy veterans in there, any Navy veterans? One of them back there. Okay, so you could do one of two things. You could go on to A school. You could go to your next school and get trained, or if you didn't, you went to a unit and you're a striker. You basically on the job training kind of a thing. And so that's what I ended up being, a striker. I had a school, but it wasn't open and available at that time. And so I went to this unit, and it was a P3 squadron. Most everybody else was going to ship assignments. P3s are so large you couldn't land on aircraft carriers, so we were always land based. Somebody said to me, "How'd you get that assignment?" I don't know. They gave me orders. I said, "I'm in the Navy." They gave me orders, told me where to go. They said I'm going to P3 squadron, so I thought I was okay. So years later in the National Guard, when things were going on in Bosnia, I'd been in the military for 20 some years. I had deployed as an enlisted guy in the Navy, but in the National Guard, I really hadn't gone anywhere. So things were going on in Bosnia. And so I put my hand up and volunteered to go, and up until about a month before I went, I was supposed to go to Sarajevo. I was supposed to be in Bosnia, right in the heart of where things were going on. And at the last minute, they said, "Oh, no, we need you up in Hungary." Garden spot of that's Europe. I'm telling you, it was a beautiful place to be at. So volunteered for Bosnia, got Hungary. And then a few years later, Iraqi freedom and enduring freedom broke out. And so I stuck my hand up and said, I'll volunteer to go there. Volunteered to go to Iraq. I knew I was going to Iraqi freedom about a month before I end up over there. "Oh, no, you're not going to be in Iraq. You can be in Kuwait." So somehow my assignments just kind of always seem to be kind of in that area. I've been accused, at least by one chaplain or another, of being the golden boy, that everything I touch, turned golden and so forth. And I'm not sure that it did that necessarily, but it just was kind of part of, of how things kind of worked out. Sometimes you say, okay, you open yourself up, you don't know what you're going to get. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not so good. I can tell you some bad things that have gone on in my life too. I'm not going to sit here and tell you a whole lot of that, but I'll tell you just a couple of things that went on while I was in Iraq or in Kuwait. Had an opportunity to go up to Iraq, and so I got over to Kuwait. And those of you who do that time shift thing know the first about week you're over there, you can't sleep worth a darn. The middle of the night, you're usually wide awake, and everybody's sleeping. You're up awake. So I got up in the middle of the night, couldn't sleep, and went over to the there was a little place that you could go get on the internet. So I got over there and was, just getting on, checking some emails and so forth, and didn't have an office yet, so I didn't have my own computer. And so about 3:30 in the morning, they kicked us out to clean. So I'm standing outside talking to some of the soldiers who were out there, because we were all in our PT uniforms. We weren't in the dress uniform. Couldn't see the unit patches and so forth. And I'm talking to one guy, and I said, "Well, where are you from?" And he said, "Well, I'm from Kentucky." I said, "Really? You're from Kentucky?" He said, "Who are you here with?" "Oh, we're the 2123rd, this transportation unit." I said, "Well, I'm a Kentucky Guard too." And we got talking, and he said, "Why don't you come up?" He said, "We go up to Iraq all the time." They were on HETs, the big, huge trucks that don't even fit on our regular highways, and they take big tanks up there and other big equipment. And so got on a convoy going up to Iraq. And my commander wasn't real happy I was taking his chaplain assistant. He didn't care about me. He was Tennessee Guard. He didn't care about me as much, but he said, I promised I was going to bring all my people back here safe and sound. So you're taking the chaplain assistant." I said, "So I can't go without her." So we ended up going, and I firmly believed that God was going to be with us, that we were going to be okay through all this, or wouldn't let me go. And so I've kind of had that mantra throughout most of my life, that I knew that if I'm getting called to do something, that I'm going to be okay. Sometimes you worry about what's going to be, and I will say there were some pucker factors along the way there, especially when on the radio they said this special, there was some suspected ID activity on bridge, and they named them like 1, 2, 3, 4. And so, bridge 20, whatever it was. And when we got to bridge 20, that was a little eerie kind of driving through there, But anyway, not to say that there was never worry or concern with some of that. I kind of always knew that I was going to get through things without too much difficulty. You remember there was in 2004, maybe late 2004 or early 2005, there was a bombing that went on up in Iraq. Somebody had walked in, and the surgeon had walked in with a backpack into a dining facility, and it had gone off. And I get this email from my mother. My mother says, "Are you okay? Are you okay? We heard there's a bombing up there." So I'm thinking, okay, this is the time not to email my mother back, but get her on the phone, talk to her. I said, "Okay, Mom, first of all, I'm in Kuwait. This is in Iraq, hundreds of miles north of where I'm at. Nowhere near, but I'm okay." I said, "When you and Dad were down in Alabama, things were going on. More things happened than just the bombings that went on. They cut the brake line on Dad's car just enough so once they got somewhere, if they pushed on the brakes, they would break and they'd lose their brakes. Sugar in the gas tank." They called my mom all the time and saying, "We see your kids out there." And dad was a northerner. He was from West Virginia, coming down and messing with Southern business, so there were all kinds of things that went on. I said, so, I said, Mom, when all these things were going on, did you leave? No. Why'd you stay? Because we were supposed to be there. That's where we were supposed to be. Didn't matter what was going on, but I was supposed to be there. And I said, Mom, I'm where I needed to be. Okay, this is where I'm supposed to be as well. There may be some difficulties, or maybe some troubles are going on, and I know you're concerned. Thank you for being concerned. Pray for me. I appreciate that, but I'm okay, Mom. So, okay. Those are a couple of the things that kind of went on and helped me, I think, with my own journey in life, to know that that if God called you something, I've said this before, God called you something, then you go for it. You don't ask questions. You kind of figure it out along the way. I said I've worked for Guidepost magazines too, and there's a story in last April, May of 2023 of my chapel assistant and I, and being in Kuwait. And in this story, we were in one of our down trace units was a mortuary affairs unit. So we would go and visit with them. I don't know if you know, that's probably one of the worst jobs you could have. You're just taking care of a body all day long. That's what you're doing. Any casualty comes through there, you've got to go touch them and inventory and do all this kind of stuff. And it's probably a thankless job for a lot of these folks. And they were a reserve unit out of Puerto Rico. We would go down there and visit with them a couple times a week. And so they also did ramp ceremonies. You know what ramp ceremonies are? So when the bodies leave the country, actually they line up on either side of the aircraft. And as the containers are going on the aircraft, people, salute as they go between where they're at. And then there's a little ceremony that happens afterward. And so we did our share. Our unit was in charge of doing those ramp ceremonies when they would leave out of Kuwait. All the casualties from Iraq came down through Kuwait, and then they would leave to go to Dover, Delaware. And one particular time, one particular ramp ceremony, I got done doing it, and there were some words and a prayer, and I just felt like just a very strong, overwhelming feeling that there was something more I needed to do. And there were about 6 or 7 containers on the aircraft, and so I went and touched each one and had a little prayer that for their family in particular, because I knew what was going to happen here in the days to come as they got home. And so and that became sort of what I did for the next and any other ramp ceremonies I would do. About, I don't know, 3 or 4 years later after this, I was endorsed by a group called National Association of Evangelicals. And we had an annual event that we would go and they do some training. And this particular year that we had it was in Branson, Missouri. And our endorser, his church is right there. So they did a potluck. And they said, okay, we want you, don't go sit all together. You go and mingle with folks and talk to them, get to know them and so forth. And so that's what we did. And I sat across from this older man, and he's probably my age now. I don't know. He seemed like an older man, but we got talking, and during the lunch, he was telling me a little bit about himself. But then people started leaving a little bit, and so he took me as confidence, and he said, my grandson died in Iraq, and or died. He was killed in Iraq and so forth, and it just came over me that I'll tell him about the ramp ceremonies. That every casualty comes through Kuwait, and it was the same time frame that I was over there. I said, your grandson came through when I was there. I'm convinced of that. Convinced that was that night that I was there, that I had this overwhelming feeling that I needed to do something more. That was because his grandson was all in one of those containers. And I told him that, and he just wept. It just touched him so much. And it touched me too, because sometimes you wonder, the little things that you do they really mean anything? What do they mean? was it just something that I, that I did, did it really go unnoticed? And not that you have to get noticed for everything you do, but what's the meaning and purpose of it all? But it touched that man more than I really knew. So immediately after that conversation, we were told, okay, come on, we're going to the sanctuary. There was a concert, and so there was a quartet that sang for us. And so we finished the concert, and I'm starting to walk down the hall, and I hear this chaplain. Of course, now there's like 50 chaplains, and they're all turning around to see who they're calling. But it was this older gentleman with a buddy fist, and he said, I wanted you to meet a man who prayed for my grandson. He's coming back from Iraq. So it's to me part of spirituality and part of kind of finding meaning and purpose in life is having those kind of moments that that God has used you some kind of a way, help another person. At least for chaplains, that's kind of one of our core values, as to how we reach out and touch other people. And it's good to know that that it works, that it's something that it happens. And as at least as I listen to God for those kind of cues for what to do, seem to in a lot of ways bring some meaning to some folks. Just being open to God for what He had for me. And I would say the same for you, that being open to what God may have for you, what's out there for you, and what kind of things can be helpful to you would be something that I would encourage you to do. Not that there aren't any punches, and I would say sometimes even roll with the punches too, because they're going to come. Just because I had good assignments and good things happen doesn't mean that there weren't some troublesome things that that happened to me too. I've had some losses in my life. I had a brother that died when he was 37, and of course losing my parents and grandparents just because of age-related stuff. My parents were in their 90s, so I can't complain about that. But there's still, there's still tough things that happen. Went through divorce 2 years ago, and so there's not always good things that happen to people in their life. So it's not to say that everything that happens in life aren't going to be good things for you. But I think as we continue in life, even as the bad things happen, we have to sit back and try to figure out what the meaning of even some of those things are and how we can overcome and continue to do it. I haven't always gotten what I wanted, but really I've gotten kind of things that I need. Some of you may know that if you've seen the prayer of an unknown Confederate soldier, you've seen that circulated around this area here at all. I used to use it for spirituality groups. And it talked about that, you asked for this and you got that, and you didn't get anything you asked for, but you got everything you hoped for. Sometimes I kind of look at life in that kind of a way. Sometimes I, pushed in one way and pushed really hard and nothing happens, but then it's really, something else opens up in another direction. And as we're listening and being in tune for what God wants for us, those kinds of things will happen to us. With God, I've gone and been and done what's necessary, and I think God is pretty much, met the desires of my heart and so forth. I'm here on vacation now this week, and I get to hang out with one of his sons and one of my other daughter's sons, and go camping with them the rest of the week. And so, life is good. And again, not with challenges, but as you look at your own lives and the challenges that you're struggling with and working toward, whether they're physical here, whether they're substance abuse related, or whatever it is, challenges that are out there, I will tell you that God has not abandoned you, and you can look towards Him, strength and help you need. One of the spirituality groups that I was doing in Louisville years and years ago, I don't know how many spirituality groups in a substance abuse unit. I show up one day, and here's a guy that I used to be in the Navy with. He's in my spirituality class now. And it's kind of like a little odd to have a guy that I used to abuse substances with myself. And I had to think, by the grace of God, I got off that early and did it through my Navy days. stopped doing that to the extent that I was doing it in the Navy. Talk about being a drunken sailor, and I was. But, you know, God's given me a lot of opportunities, and when I've said yes to them, and it's allowed me to move forward, continue to move forward. I'm retired, but I'm still looking for opportunities. I'm still taking opportunities. I've told folks my only criteria with being retired and doing things for folks, that it has to have a kind of spiritual aspect to it. I want to just do things, just to do things. I'm not going to go work at some sports store to be the greeter so I can get a 10% discount or whatever they do. So I'm not going to do that kind of stuff. I'm going to, whatever it is, it's going to be related to chaplaincy. There's a thing where they say chaplains for life. I think it's true. I think it's very true that, even though you don't get paid for what you're doing, well, I'm getting a retirement check, so I guess I am still getting paid. So I just keep moving forward, keep looking at how God can work in my own life. I urge you to do the same. With that,
Thank you so much, Chaplain Gretz, for your meaningful words. For those of you who wrote down a question, let's see, Chaplain Bearden, could you help me out and walk down the aisle and everyone pass their papers to the middle? And while that's getting going, you can stand here. I'll turn on this. Okay. I have got a couple to grease the skids questions here. What was it like working in the Pentagon?
first of all, as a 1-star there, I almost felt like I was a coffee boy, There were a lot of upper ranking folks there, but one of the things that I over the years have run into is chaplains who said, my best years as a chaplain was when I was a battalion chaplain. I got to be out there with the troops and, do things. I didn't have to supervise, I didn't have to do anything like that. It's a whole different level at the Pentagon. But for me, I got to minister to people of very high rank and so forth. Would use the chaplain in the same kind of way that, anybody else would use the chaplain. But I got to kind of be up there and know that women and men of high rank struggle with issues too. So I kind of got to see that side of it. So that for me was probably one of the things that I liked about being.
Oh, cool. How do you recognize if you're in God's will?
So for me, sometimes it was a trial and error things. For instance, as I said, thinking I was going to go active duty and kind of pushing forward with that. And when doors close, sometimes just kind of knowing when to stop and to sit back and decide to maybe move in a different direction, that maybe that's not where God wanted me to be. I mean, several times over my VA career, I tried to move up to, beyond being a chief chaplain, tried to move up to our headquarters and applied for probably about half a dozen different positions up there, and I always got turned down. And I thought, I've probably got all the good credentials to do that. And people were encouraging me from behind saying, yeah, we want you to be up there, and we want you to be the director. And, it never worked out. So kind of sometimes it's from just having the door closed.
Great. What do you say or do when an individual that you're meeting with has hit rock bottom?
The many things that we have
Well, you've hit rock bottom, you're at the bottom. You got nowhere to go but up. And so that's kind of part of it. But I try to remind people, the psalmist in the Old Testament many times talked about all the troubles that he had. But then if you read through some of those psalms, kind of get this sort of same story where all of a sudden he says, but wait a minute. Yeah, there were those times that, that God brought me through this thing here. And yet while I continue to trust in God, even though I'm in a bad place right now, kind of reminding and looking back on life. So sometimes I help people remind of sometimes, talk to me about sometimes that God got you through a pretty rough period of life. Sometimes just reminding and saying, you know, that same kind of thing can happen again.
How do you maintain hope when you are surrounded by so much despair? These are some good questions.
They are. Yeah, it's sometimes easy, and I'm not gonna try to get political or anything on anybody in here. But, you know, it seems like nobody can get along. It seems like we're so polarized, you know, you're either here or here. There's no really in between kind of thing. I just kind of have to look back and say, okay, you know, God's got me this far already, and not get too troubled by it. You know, I've served every president since I got in when Gerald, I enlisted when Gerald Ford was president. So I've gone through a lot of presidents and a lot of folks. And I guess technically now, since I'm not a VA employee, I'm not working for any president. I don't know, but I've worked there all the way up. Biden was still president when I retired. So I work for a lot of folks, and there's been a lot of different policies and a lot of different ways to look at life. And I just try to stay constant through it all and not let it get down too much. You know that God's got an individual plan for me, kind of has me in mind as well. So if that's the case, then I can't get bothered by what everybody else is doing around me.
There's a couple of questions along these lines of basically, if there's a loving and caring God, why is there war? And will there be more great wars in the future?
Well, that's it. I wish I had the crystal ball to say that. I think there probably will be. I mean, you read the same papers I do. You see that there's, you know, China and so forth. Every time I talk to the military folks, I ask them now, what's our main concern? And their main concern is China. That's not classified information. I think it's for everybody knows. So will there be another war? You know, I think as long as there are human beings on this planet, we probably will still have wars. And why, if there's such a good God? Because we don't listen to God a whole lot. That was your question. So, you know, it's a hard question, you know, and why, and then we get sucked into it, and then we have to pay the ramifications for it. I've been told that because of free will. Free will, yeah, because of mankind doing what they want to do, and not listening, not caring about the next person next to them.
So you mentioned you worked for a lot of presidents. Have you ever met one of your presidents?
I've met Clinton. It's the only one I met. I was out running around one. It was actually we were doing our VA basic course in Hampton, Virginia. And on Saturday, we were running around, and he had just been. Remember when Clinton first got elected, and he took his Congress and everybody, and they went to McDonald's. McDonald's, yeah, McDonald's too. But he went to some place in Virginia, and they all kind of met, strategized, and so forth. And then I guess he took some time out. And we were in this one park in near Leestown, Virginia, and so we went to get back in our car, and they said, "No, you can't leave everybody. President's coming." Okay, so we kind of hung around, and his mother-in-law was there. Chelsea was there. She was like, I don't know, 8 years old, 10 years old. He came out, and I got to shake his hand. I got my picture taken with him, and I've met Al Gore, and shook his hand as well. He came down for a flood event when I was on state active duty and protected guard. So those are the two that I've met.
And you weren't even that high ranking.
No, I wasn't high ranking at that time.
Is it hard working in an environment where you have to provide spiritual care to many different beliefs and religions?
Not really. Really. If you look at every human being as a valuable person, then it doesn't matter. You can provide spiritual care to anybody. And part of providing spiritual care is just being a decent human being to another human being. So if you're listening and you're paying attention to what people are wanting and needing and so forth, then it's easy to do.
Thank you. There's a a prayer request here. I'll give this to Chaplain Gretz and he can pray for who wrote this. And then, John, you just keep scooting over here. You have a question to ask? That you keep scooting over here. Did you have a question you wanted to ask? No.
Where'd you have the bride go?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question. But I wanted to, if you had a question for Chaplain Gretz.
No, anyhow, her birthday tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
I will tell you that on the back table, I did bring a few resources from Guideposts, and David put some, Chaplain Miller put some other stuff out there as well. One of the things that I brought is a little card back there, and there's something called an Abide app that Guidepost has, something you can download, and it could give you some daily devotional kind of stuff. He's got them in the back here, and it's free of charge. You can sign up for it. It'll give you some, especially at night, what I find most helpful. It'll kind of talk to you about some stories and tell you some things. I'll tell you what, if you have trouble going to sleep, you just listen to one of those. It works. Just the tone of voice and the kind of the message it's giving to you as well. But then you're welcome to take one of those with you and download it on your smartphone, and you've got it there for you. Welcome to take that with you, and any other resources that I've got back there, you're welcome to take. And my card's back there as well, number and email on it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for answering those questions. And let's give him another. And hopefully he'll be back there at his table and you can shake his hand afterwards too. At this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Mark Woldridge to lead us in singing God Bless America. You'll find the words printed in your bulletin on the inside cover. And you can remain standing. I'm going to invite Chaplain Barry Malone to come up and give us the benediction.
Why, with your eyes wide open, receive the good word. Go in peace to love and to serve your neighbor. Go in peace and strength and grace to receive the love of your neighbor. This concludes today's program, filled with resiliency with health. God bless you all. Thank you.
And one more second. Thanks, Chaplain Malone. As we wrap up our time together today, I'd like to give the last word to our devoted leader, Chaplain Bearden.
To the veteran staff, family, and friends of Chaplain Service, thank you so much for joining us for this spiritual resiliency event. Chaplain Gretz, we are most grateful for you sharing your time, talents, experiences with us. And from one chaplain to another, your heartfelt remarks were well received, and you made a significant difference by being here today for this event. And Chaplain Miller, this event was your dream child, which grew over the past number of months and stood tall for us to enjoy and benefit from today. Give it up for Chaplain Miller. event possible and your ongoing tireless acts of service to both veterans and staff here at VA Northern Indiana. In addition to those who joined in person, we had a number of individuals who connected via Teams. We really appreciate, we're encouraged by your support also. Now, for those who are able to be here in person, before leaving, please feel free. Here you go. This is an important announcement. Please feel free to enjoy some cookies and punch on your way out. These refreshments were generously provided by the VA Center for Development and Civic Engagement. This concludes the event. Thanks again, everyone. You're at liberty to go.